Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston,
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
and this is the weekly pulse check where we take a look at what's going on in the news around automation and AI. And Michael, there's a lot going on, and so much.
There's a lot going on.
So much so that we're going to cover 5 articles today. It's been a while since we've covered 5 in one pulse check.
Okay,
But
let's bring it on.
let's dive right in. Okay, first one is from TechCrunch. The title of it is ChatGPT users send 2.5 billion prompts a day. Now, Michael, that's a really big number.
I think a billion of them come from my house. I'm just thinking, but anyway.
if you had every person in North America, South America, and Africa and asked them to do one prompt a day, that's how many you'd have. 2.5 billion. Aren't you impressed that I did that research?
I'm impressed that you did that. I'm sure a good portion of those are coming from like Rwanda and Chad are probably going to be a good portion of those.
Yes. And I should note, I did a prompt in order to come to this conclusion. So that adds up as a 2.5 billion. So
exactly.
So give us your thoughts on this article.
So it's interesting because we know there's a lot of usage for any of these models. And I don't know how Anthropic's Claude, is coming out here, or Perplexity or Google or any of the others are showing up in terms of their volume that they're getting. But it seems like a lot.
Yeah.
Until you look back to, as this article mentions, the idea of Google's searches. So Google searches account for 14 billion searches per day versus these ChatGPT of 2.5 billion per day. So a lot of stuff happening in both of them. Those are big numbers, just in general. Those are big numbers.
Yeah.
But the other part of it too, as I looked at it, the next part of that discussion here, the 2.5 billion prompts, they indicate that about 330 million of those are coming from users in the United States. And if you take our population, that's basically one prompt per day per person in the entire United States. And I didn't do any ChatGPTs on that one. I just figured that out myself. Anyway, but even then, globally, what that says to me is that the United States is only using about 10% of the ChatGPTs or OpenAI's ChatGPT platform, where 90% of the rest of the world is making up the rest of that traffic. So I thought that was very interesting. I would have expected it to be a little lopsided, more like 60% coming from the United States and 40% from the rest of the world.
I would think the same. And it is interesting, just the fact that the number of prompts has more than doubled in 8 months.
Right.
So this is taken off like a rocket ship. And I don't know about you, but I'm hearing that more and more people are starting to use tools like ChatGPT over Google search. And I think that as more and more people get comfortable with it and start doing their own prompting and learning how it works, that's just going to continue to increase. So I would expect this trajectory to continue in the near term. I don't think it's going to slow down.
I don't think it will either, especially if you start factoring in agents now. If you have a few 100 million agents doing a bunch of different activities every single day, I suspect that OpenAI's platform will have to grow double again just because of that.
Yeah. Agents are largely powered by large language model. So they're going to have to prompt ChatGPT and a variety of other models to do what they do. No doubt about it.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. The next article is from GovCIO Media. White House unveils AI action plan to secure global dominance.
You didn't say it right, though. It's the AI action plan.
The AI action plan. So we've been talking about this for several months, ever since the U.S. named David Sachs as their AI and crypto czar. And he's had this committee working with him to build this AI plan. They said it was going to come out in the summer, and lo and behold, it gets released today. So this news headline is actually from today. I don't know that we've ever covered an article the same day it came out, but here we are. So this is pretty interesting. You know, the tenets of this plan. They call them pillars. And I would say just my quick takeaway, and then I'll let you break it down for us. But this is all about, and it even says this, the U.S. has said, this is a national security and economic imperative. They keep bringing up security. This is not just about, we want to be the world leader or what have you. It also has to deal with national security, which I think is fascinating. So, Michael, break it all down for us.
So again, these are all the policies that are being released to be favorable for AI research and AI development. And as we look at this here, a lot of their terms are very nebulous, if you will, as you might imagine most government reports kind of being. The idea is this is going to be free from ideological bias or engineered social agendas, and reorienting the policy towards private research. So they're really not saying much other than that's what's happening right now. So I don't see a lot of amazing stuff coming out of that. The one thing that did hit me, because they said there are 3 pillars, and we'll kind of go through them. One was to accelerate the AI innovation. And, we've heard about all kinds of investments in various projects. We've got another next article to be talking about that very specifically. But these projects that are being touted and funded and promoted by our government is really to go to how can we continue this innovation. And a lot of that innovation piece comes from removing some of the restrictions that, say, Europe has put in place. So whereas Europe is more closely guarding the people and the workers and the way that they're developing this to make it more governed, even under the development process, that, as we all know, stifles things. It's a lot easier to do instead of ready, fire, aim, fire, it's ready, fire, 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 and then aim kind of thing. So that's what our industry's been up to lately. And we've seen that with Facebook. We've seen it with a bunch of other platforms that come out and they develop stuff rapidly, so rapidly that it's difficult for any kind of governing agency to keep up with the implications of that development. And so as we see this here, it's basically saying to me, we're going to keep on stepping back and let the industry do its thing to help push things forward. So we'll see how that works from that perspective. The second one is to build American AI infrastructure. And this is, again, a big deal. Again, globally, everyone's saying the same thing. In almost every country, it was a protectionism, but nationalism. We go in there, we want to be the best fill in the blank country infrastructure. And that's what we're doing here with the American infrastructure related to this. We saw that an article we covered last week with a national, was it Denmark or no, Sweden? I can't remember one of the countries in the Nordics that talked about specifically their national AI platform that they've built with an LLM directly within their own government to be able to support that in a fair and just way. And we are kind of going the opposite way, which is like stepping back from, say, letting private industry do this, but do it in America. Right. And then the third one was talking about that we want to be able to lead in international AI diplomacy and security. Again, getting back to the whole security thing. This is an interesting twist on words, because as I look at this, if you replace AI with nuclear, it makes it sound even more with what they're trying to aim for, which is, instead of leading international AI diplomacy, it's leading in international nuclear diplomacy and security, implying the weaponization of said technology. And they even mentioned in here this, according to the Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum, AI is going to accelerate innovation, and we are in an AI arms race with China. And the only thing that's holding us back is energy. So we've talked about that a couple times on here, that, that the rapid and all-consuming need for power to create these data centers to be able to power the AI platforms. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but to indicate that this is an arms race with China, I think is really trying to pull in that sort of Cold War mentality to get folks within the government, at least, to rally around this type of investment.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, clearly the American AI policy is relying first and foremost on the private sector to make this happen. They make no bones about it. It's all about the private sector driving it and getting the government out of the way, remove the red tape, remove the regulations. And as you said, the energy, adding power to the grid is a huge, huge priority. They talk about making federal lands available to build data centers. They talk about more emphasis on nuclear power. So yeah, it covers so many different things. It's not just about having the best technology and the best people working on the best technology. It's the foundation, it's the infrastructure, it's the regulatory side, and it's the partnership with our allies around the world, making sure that we are investing in those areas. We saw a huge investment in the Middle East recently and a lot of collaboration going on there. So fascinating report. And I knew it would have some of those things in it, but it certainly had a lot more than I expected. And we'll have to dig into it even more in the weeks to come.
Absolutely.
All right, next article from Wall Street Journal. And this is very, very pertinent to what we just talked about. SoftBank and OpenAI's $500 billion AI project struggles to get off the ground. So 6 months ago, we remember the president standing shoulder to shoulder with the CEOs of OpenAI and SoftBank and Oracle. And they announced this huge project, Stargate, $500 billion project. However, doesn't seem like all parties appear to have been ready to play. So why don't you tell us about it, Michael?
Yeah, we talked about this. Again, back to the whole concept of nationalism and the pride of having American AI innovation and infrastructure. So Stargate is just that. It's this rallying cry to have the government promote that sort of infrastructure play. But to your point, organizations who have made those commitments are dragging their feet just a bit. And as part of that, it's been very difficult for the next set of activities to happen. So right now, while they pledged in January to invest $100 billion immediately, and now I'm not sure what immediately means. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that they don't either. The reality is that the first goal, which is a very modest goal according to the article, is building a small data center by the end of the year in Ohio. So not quite the massive rollout that we were all expecting, considering I seem to recall that X created their data center for Grok in like 6 minutes and had $100 billion worth of investment in it. So waiting to the end of the year to build a small data center in Ohio, it seems to me like this is not just dragging your feet, it's almost like making a statement. So it'll be interesting to see how these companies who are frenemies will start moving forward to actually move forward with their commitment, or maybe even redefine what their commitment is going to be to this Stargate project.
Yeah. Well, Altman clearly is not waiting around too long for SoftBank to get into gear. Altman has struck deals with other operators like CoreWeave. He's gotten some started with Oracle. So he's not waiting around, and there are data centers being built in Texas and multiple locations to meet this huge demand we have for AI power and what have you. So I think Altman has kind of made a name for himself and not getting stuck in over analysis paralysis or whatever you want to call it. So SoftBank may have missed their chance to, kind of ride along with him, and maybe they'll catch up and they'll make some investments here before too long. But it is kind of surprising that, that thing started with a bang and then it kind of ended with a little bit of a whimper, continues to evolve.
Well, I think, but part of that, talking about that, the deal they did with CoreWeave and some of the others, as the article is stating here, they're moving forward at a pace that is much more rapid than their commitments to the Stargate project. So, this idea that they're dragging their feet on one side doesn't mean they're dragging their feet all over, because within this, they're putting together $100 billion worth of they've completed for this year. OpenAI has already done that. So we're already seeing that they make the commitments and spend the money. And these are not small data centers. I mean, they talk about this one here, 4.5 gigawatts of capacity, which is enough to power 4 million homes, or one big data center with OpenAI's technology. So lots of interesting stuff happening within these organizations as they are each trying to outdo each other. So when you talk about a nationalized arms race with China, I see it more as a corporate arms race among behemoth clients, behemoth customers. So I don't see this as something that we're going to be outgrowing anytime soon, because they're throwing so much money and so much infrastructure at it from a corporate perspective.
Yep, agreed. Okay, our next article is from IT Pro, and it's titled "IT Leaders Don't Trust AI Agents Yet, and They're Missing Out on Huge Financial Gains." So, Michael, it is true that agentic is still all the buzz, and most companies are thinking about it, exploring it, piloting it. But a recent survey suggested that the IT leaders have even less trust today in the idea of autonomous agents than they did a year ago. And specifically, it's gone down from 43% to 27%. So why is that?
I'll tell you exactly why that is. No, the reality is there's a number of different factors that could potentially falling into the factors that are affecting that number. The first one being that the technology itself is not necessarily delivering the promises that were expected. So as we look at the technology, and you and I have personally seen this, I'm sure our listeners have seen this also, as they have done their own prompts to various large language models, that the results that come back sometimes are things that, we don't expect. And it's not necessarily that they're hallucinating as much as they are providing information in ways that we just didn't want, and even though we've prompted it very clearly. So the output that they're getting could be a reason why they're not sold on it yet, and why they don't trust it, because quite honestly, it hasn't proven itself.
Right.
When you talk about that, and perhaps combining with some of the more cultural aspects of this, where you have folks who are very experienced in their roles in doing this, and then they're looking to lean upon AI in a way that would allow them to get those benefits, and they're becoming disappointed by it. They are now pushing back in different ways, telling their upper management or leadership that, hey, we're not ready for this yet. Maybe it'll get there. But based on our tests and their usage right now, we don't feel comfortable with the results. So maybe we should start slowing down on some of the expectations we've been giving to our investors or our other stakeholders, that this is going to be dramatically changing the way we do work. So a cultural impact is much more difficult to change than the technology. So if we have technology and it does start, this is amazing technology. We know what it can do. The challenge is getting the guardrails around from a governance perspective to ensure that it's safe and is giving you the output that we're expecting, and then letting folks who are able to take advantage of it feel comfortable enough to do so. So one of the things they mentioned in here is that over the next 12 months, they said more than 60% of organizations expect to form human agent teams. So having a team that has agents as part of its output. So input comes in, humans and agents work together, and output goes out. And I foresee that that's going to be something that's relatively normal in most organizations as you go forward. I think there'll be some organizations that'll be a little more heavy on the agent side, and maybe some that'll be less heavy on the agent side. But the count of organizations having, 60% of them come into this and say, you know what, I think we need to have this in play to some extent, really tells me the story that people are getting more comfortable with it and they're planning for it. So whether or not they're trusted right now, they are still planning for it, with perhaps the expectation that within the next 12 months, not only will the technology, which we've seen change weekly, catch up, but also the culture of people and the culture of the company, which does take a long time to shape and mold, will finally get to the place where the comfort level of having these agents working alongside humans in a workflow will seem natural. So it'll take a while, and I expect that they'll get the value they look for out of these processes, but it'll be a combination of the technology and the culture that makes it happen.
Yeah. Capgemini is cited in this article quite a bit, and they did a report recently where they predicted that in the next 3 years, agentic AI is set to deliver up to 450 billion in economic value through revenue gains and cost savings. Now, they also counter that by saying fewer than a quarter of companies have launched pilots and only 14% have begun implementation. So the forecast, the predictions are still gargantuan, and Capgemini is one of many companies out there espousing this over and over and over. So yeah, companies are paying attention to that. I think they've all become enamored with the potential. Their pace of exploring it and moving in that direction seems to be a little slower and a little bit more cautious than maybe they were with Gen AI, because there was a lot of potential for that as well. And a lot of pilots kicked off, pretty quickly with the Gen AI era. Many of those didn't materialize the way they anticipated. So yeah, I think companies are, they're a little exhausted with all the hype, and they're maybe burned a little bit from some of the past failed, projects or pilots, and they want to do it right. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do think they will eventually position themselves to start to take advantage of this and start benefiting in the ways that Capgemini and others are talking about.
I think this goes along the same lines of most of the cutting edge technologies, where there are firms who are going to lead the way. They'll take the quote unquote investment, meaning the losses that they feel or they get hit with as they try to make this technology work to get the benefits they want. And they'll be leading in that field, while others will be more slow to adopt it and much more tenuous in how they approach it. So like any technology, everyone knows the first set of folks are out there. They're in the wilderness on their own, trying to make it all work together. And some people like to be in that spot. Some organizations feel like they have to be there. And while other organizations may take a wait and see approach. So there's nothing wrong with any of these approaches, but the reality is that the only problem is that if you don't start at all, then you'll be so far behind it. You're at the risk of not being able to move forward because you've been left behind. Good point. You need to do something, and you need to keep up to date by listening, of course, to our podcast and making the next step within your organization to prepare for this type of technology.
All right. Our fifth and final article for the day is from AI Invest. It's titled "Creatives Resist AI Automation, Demand Control Over Work." So in a recent study by Stanford, 1,500 so-called creatives. Michael, you're a creative. These are writers, designers, artists, so forth. Well, they expressed their views on AI in the workplace, and they made it very clear that they are reluctant to have AI automate their core tasks. So they're open to it as it relates to repetitive chores, but they insist on retaining authorship and control over their work. What's your take on this, Michael?
All I can say is the Luddites were right, and that's all I have to say. Now, the reality is I can understand the perspective of these creatives coming in, and while I don't espouse to be one, I certainly have a tendency towards it, even though I'm extremely untalented in many areas. The reality is that, if we look at financial companies or other companies who are doing work, the work within, say, a financial analyst that they're doing may take the same amount of time that someone in the marketing department takes to create the perfect visual for an ad, or a perfect visual for a commercial that people would see on TV or on an ad on the internet. And the value that the organization places on those two people is very different. So the financial analyst will find that their pay scale is extremely different than those who are working within the creative arts department or the web development department. So they're already starting off at a spot where they're undervalued. And their article mentions this. So taking that to the next step, saying, well, listen, we're already undervalued. And now you're taking tools that can, and I don't want to use their words because I don't think they're right, but I think they can steal our work. There's been litigation on this already, saying there's a fair use rule that can support this, training on different types of materials. But the reality is that they're seeing this as, well, if it takes me 3 seconds as a non-creative to go out to any one of these image generation sites and get an image that I think is good enough for our usage, I won't have to I want to employ a creative to do that work. And therefore they truly are losing out on their work. We've seen this with the Hollywood writers. We've seen it with a bunch of other folks in the same type of industry where this creative thinking and thought process is being slowly stripped away and replaced by prompts that you can toss into OpenAI, as we saw, one of the 2.5 billion prompts a day, and get a response that's either good enough or maybe even on par with what you'd expect to get from a human artist or writer. So the way that they're approaching this is that seeing the concept of leveraging the work that a creative does, whether that's writing or art or whatnot, to allow them to monetize that work for either for training or for other usage, rather than simply putting it out there to be scraped off the internet and used as training data for free.
Well, the article talks about this area called decentralized AI or DAI, which offers kind of an alternative by embedding rights and attribution into the systems themselves. What did you think about that?
Again, I understand where they're coming from on it. I think it's one of those. It's a tough place to be in. So if you are an independent artist or an independent writer, leveraging a tool like this to be able to embed some kind of codes or to be able to protect your content from training data could be a great thing. But there's a whole lot of content that's developed on a daily basis for corporations or other organizations that is being paid for already. So those artists who create those ads for Mercedes-Benz or whoever the company is, they've already been paid. So the work that they're being paid for now goes out and gets maybe caught up into this training data because that's the way the internet works. It's open and it's available. And so in those kind of situations, there's not going to be the same kind of DAI available for those images or that writing or any other art that goes out there. So that's the tough part. And so if you take the independent artist component and you back that out, I think it's a very small percentage of the amount of stuff that gets generated, because there's a lot of companies and a lot of websites that are being built that are leveraging people who pay for those artists or those workers to create copy for them. So again, I don't know how that's going to line up over time. And there may be a different approach to this too, which that, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, that actual human created work may have additional value. So to say I have an actual painting made with brush strokes from a human hanging on my wall becomes a lot more valuable, not only to me, but to be able to feel that the expression in that painting that the person put into it. That may become much more valuable to me than a picture of that.
If it can be authenticated.
Well, it's a picture on my wall that actually exists. So it's an individual, it's a one of a kind thing. So it's not a picture of it, because again, that evokes saying, so we talk about they go to Mona Lisa. Why do people go to see the Mona Lisa when the Mona Lisa you can see pictures of the Mona Lisa everywhere, right? Why would you go actually see the actual painting? Well, because you want to feel the way the emotion was put in by the artist. And that's why art museums and art exhibits, I don't think they're ever going to go away because people want to feel that emotion, and the artists want to be able to be a part of that experience to show off the work that they've done. So if you're talking about that in between the folks creating physical art where there's emotion attached to a physical object, and then this middle part of this, I would say a small amount, because I can't quantify this, but a smaller number of independent artists who are producing materials that are being put out on the internet, who could have their data transposed into a data set that's used for AI training. And then the other bulk of it, which is the corporate already paid for version of artwork that these artists are producing. That middle part, I think, is going to be tough. So there may be a go at it to be able to do that. I'm not sure how successful it'll be personally.
Well, the article ends with a desperate plea for policymakers, to get in there and create legal protections for artists. And of course, we just talked about the AI policy of the U.S. is to deregulate, move away from that.
All those. Exactly.
So that kind of flies in the face of that. Plus, I think when IP litigation or regulations come into play, the big Fortune 500 companies are probably going to get a little bit more interest and concern from the policymakers over the artist, unfortunately. Even though the Hollywood has the big, high-paid lawyers that help them, in this regard. But I don't know if it makes that big of a difference. Well, that's all the time we have for today's Pulse Check. Michael, thank you for giving your thoughts on 5 articles today.
We covered a lot, but I think it was good. There's a lot of good stuff out there, and like you said, we did 5 today. We've been doing 4 almost every other time. The reality is that the world is changing very quickly, so we have to be able to react to it, and we'll certainly make sure we keep you all up to date.
Absolutely. Remember, we publish another podcast episode every week that has a terrific guest. So be sure and check that out. Otherwise, we will see you next time on the Pulse Check. Bye for now.